the silence of God and the echo of suffering in the modern age. The paradox of theodicy. From the earliest civilizations to the present day, a fundamental question has resonated in the heart of humanity, a question that scientific and technological progress has failed to silence. Why does a good, omnipotent, and omniscient God allow evil and suffering in the world? This is the classic problem of theodicy, a philosophical and theological concept that attempts to reconcile the existence of a perfect God with the stark reality of pain. In the modern age, this question not only persists but also takes on new and painful dimensions. We witness not only natural suffering, earthquakes, diseases, but also atrocities on an industrial scale. Genocide, the nuclear threat, systemic poverty, and globalized social injustice. Faced with these tragedies, God's silence is often felt as an absence, a betrayal, or worse, indifference. The formulation of this paradox is simple yet devastating. God is omnipotent. He can stop evil if he so desires. God is perfectly good. He desires to stop evil. Evil exists. If the first two premises are true, the third should logically be false. But, given that evil is undeniable, where does the logic break down? Evil as a consequence of freedom, the free will argument. One of the oldest and most robust responses focuses on the concept of free will, the dangerous gift of autonomy. According to this perspective, if God had created beings capable only of doing good, they would not be free beings but mere automatons, puppets programmed for obedience. For goodness, love, and moral choice to have true meaning, there must be a real possibility of choosing the opposite, evil. God, in an act of supreme love, granted humanity freedom, the capacity to make genuine choices. This freedom is an invaluable gift, the foundation of our dignity and our capacity to love. But it is also, inevitably, the source of moral evil. The cruelty, war, hatred, and exploitation that one human being inflicts upon another. From this perspective, God permits moral evil not because he desires it, but because stopping it would require revoking free will, negating our humanity and our capacity to enter into a free and authentic relationship of love with him. The pain we experience because of the bad choices of others is, sadly, the price we pay for living in a universe where choice is real. Natural evil. Evidence, formation, and purpose, the Iranian Theodicy. But what about natural evil? Earthquakes, tsunamis, childhood cancer. No one chooses these calamities. Here, theology often offers a different perspective, frequently associated with the 2nd century theologian Irenaeus of Lyons. The world as a soul forge. Irenaeus' Theodicy proposes that the world was not created as a perfect paradise from the beginning, but as a soul-building valley or a forge. In this context, physical evil as a structural necessity. A world that is stable for science and morality must have fixed natural laws, gravity, plate tectonics, biology. These laws, while necessary for life and knowledge, inevitably entail risks and suffering. For example, the same force that holds the planet together also causes earthquakes. Suffering as an agent of growth. It is through overcoming adversity that the highest virtues are forged. Compassion, courage, perseverance, and altruism. If there were no danger, there would be no courage. If there were no pain, there would be no empathy. Suffering, though terrible, can be the catalyst that calls us to action, that pulls us out of complacency, and compels us to practice kindness toward one another. It is through trials that we achieve spiritual maturity. From this perspective, God does not seek immediate comfort, but rather long-term character perfection. Evil as an unfathomable mystery, the Job perspective and the limits of reason. Beyond logical explanations, many religious traditions, especially the Judeo-Christian tradition, appeal to the concept of mystery and the limitations of human understanding. The example of Job. The book of Job is the central narrative on Theodicy. Job, a righteous man, is stripped of everything and tormented by suffering for no apparent reason. His friends offer him all sorts of logical explanations. You must have sinned. God is testing you. But in the end, it is God himself who intervenes to refute all human explanations. God does not offer Job a formula. He offers him a vision of the vastness, complexity, and power of the universe, asking him, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?" The message here is clear. The human mind is finite and cannot grasp the totality of the mind of an infinite being. Suffering may have a purpose, a place in a much larger cosmic tapestry, a design that is simply beyond our capacity to comprehend. Attempting to reduce the reason for all suffering to a simple logical equation is an act of intellectual arrogance. God's silence, in this sense, is also a reminder of our humility. Active silence. The God who suffers with humanity. In Christian theology, specifically, the problem of evil receives a radical response that goes beyond justification. Participation. The response of the Incarnation and the cross. The Christian response to suffering is not primarily an explanation, logos, but a person, Christ. By becoming incarnate, God himself enters into creation and experiences suffering in its most acute form: betrayal, physical pain, unjust death on the cross. This does not eliminate evil, but it fundamentally changes the perception of God's silence. God is not distant. The Christian God is not a cosmic clockmaker who winds the universe and then withdraws. He is a God who shares in the pain of creation. Suffering has a limit and a redemption. The crucifixion and resurrection offer the promise that suffering does not have the final word. Evil is a temporary state that will ultimately be overcome and redeemed. From this perspective, the question is not only, why does God allow evil? But also, what does God do with evil? The answer is that he confronts it, embraces it, and transforms it. Silence is not indifference, but an act of profound solidarity, inviting humanity to follow his example. Not only to understand pain, but to enter into it in order to alleviate it in others. The challenge of the modern age, our active responsibility. In the modern age, with our global awareness of injustices, God's silence compels us to a practical conclusion. The problem of evil is now, to a large extent, our problem. If the theodicy of free will is correct, much of suffering is human fault. If the Irenaean theodicy is correct, suffering exists to build character. In both cases, our response is the deciding factor. The great challenge of our time is to recognize that divine permission is not an excuse for human inaction. If God permits freedom and the process of maturation, he is delegating to us the task of being active agents of goodness. The silence is broken not by a divine voice descending from heaven to explain a plan, but by the voice of compassion that arises among men and women who choose to heal, help, and fight injustice. Love, justice, and mercy are the human response to the divine problem. The mystery of suffering is profound, but the demand for action is clear. Ultimately, the question is not only why God permits evil, but what we will do with the part of evil that is within our power to stop. Conclusion: faith in the darkness. In short, philosophy and theology offer several lenses through which to view this enigma. Free will, moral evil is the price of human freedom. A forging of the soul. Natural evil is the context for growth, virtue, and spiritual maturity. A mystery. God's reason is inscrutable to the finite human mind. Solidarity. God unites with humans suffering through the incarnation, promising ultimate redemption. The silence of God is not a conclusion, but an open question that compels us to look inward and toward others. It is in the act of faith in the darkness and in selfless service that we find not the perfect explanation, but the only viable answer, the action of human kindness against the tide of adversity. Loved what you saw? Make sure to subscribe and stay connected. A quick like, a thoughtful comment, and a share to your network make a huge difference.